Tonight, before sleep slowly finds you, I invite you to step into a very different world. A world of stone streets and flickering candlelight. A world where silence meant safety and rules were everywhere, even in the smallest moments of daily life. This is medieval Europe, not the Europe of fairy tales and shining castles, but the Europe of ordinary people. Farmers, bakers, weavers, monks, and merchants. People who lived under laws so strict, they shaped how one walked, how one spoke, and even how one slept. As you rest now, let us quietly walk back in time. In the Middle Ages, law was not something distant or abstract. It did not live only in books or courtrooms. Law lived in the streets, in the church bells, in the closing of city gates at dusk, in the way a candle was lit, and in the way it was carefully blown out before night. For medieval people, law was not a choice. It was the air they breathed. Most towns were small, surrounded by thick stone walls. These walls were not only for protection, they were also a way to control life. At sunset, a bell would ring. This bell had many names. The curfew bell, the evening bell, the bell of order. When it rang, everyone understood what it meant. Stay inside. Close your doors. Lower your voices. The night belonged to the law. Unlike today, the night was not a time of freedom. It was a time of fear. There were no street lights, no glowing windows, no steady hum of electricity. Only darkness. Deep, heavy darkness. Because of this, many medieval laws focused on controlling the night. In many cities, it was illegal to walk the streets after dark without permission. If you were caught outside, you could be fined, questioned, or even arrested, not because you were a criminal, but because the law believed that darkness invited chaos. So the safest place, according to the law, was your bed. Beds themselves were simple. Most people did not sleep alone. Entire families shared one room. Sometimes one bed. Law did not require privacy. It required order. Children slept beside parents. Servants slept near their masters. Guests slept wherever there was space. And when sleep came, it came early. Not because people were tired, but because they were required to rest. Night was regulated. Silence was expected. In many towns, speaking loudly after curfew was considered an offense. Singing, laughing, arguing, all could bring trouble. Sleep, in medieval Europe, was not just rest. It was obedience. But law did not stop at sleep. It followed people into their homes. Even the simple act of lighting a candle was carefully controlled. Candles were dangerous. Fire was feared. Many towns limited how many candles a household could use at night. Some laws required candles to be placed in specific holders. Others banned open flames entirely after dark. If a fire started, the punishment could be severe. Not always because of the damage, but because fire represented disorder. And disorder was the enemy of medieval law. To understand these rules, we must understand something important. Medieval law was not designed to make life comfortable. It was designed to keep society stable. Kings ruled by divine right. The church ruled over the soul. Local lords ruled the land. Together, they believed that strict rules kept the world from falling apart. every person had a place. Every action had limits, and breaking those limits was seen as dangerous, not only to society, but to God. Imagine a small medieval town at night. The gates are closed. The streets are empty. Shutters cover the windows dot inside a stone house. A family gathers near the hearth. They eat quietly. They speak softly, not because they want to, but because the law is listening. The law does not sleep. There were no police as we know them today, but there were watchmen men hired to walk the streets at night, carrying lanterns and spears. They listened. They watched if they heard noise. They knocked. If they saw movement, they questioned. Their job was simple: protect order. Even dreams, it seemed, belonged to the law. For modern listeners, these rules may feel strange, even cruel, but for medieval people, they were normal. Children grew up knowing them. Parents taught them. Priests reinforced them. Law was not debated. It was accepted. To question the law was to question authority, and authority was sacred. Yet, within this strict world, people adapted. They learned to whisper, to move quietly, to live within invisible boundaries. Life slowed down. Evenings were calm. Nights were long, and sleep came not with stimulation, but with silence. Perhaps that is why, as you listen now, this world feels strangely peaceful, harsh. Yes, but calm. As we continue this journey, we will uncover laws that govern clothing, food, marriage, children, and even animals. Rules that sound unbelievable today, yet once shaped real lives. But for now, let us stay here. In this quiet medieval night, the bell is rung. The doors are closed. Candles flicker low, and the world, ruled by ancient law, slowly drifts into sleep. You may do the same. As night settles in. Let us remain in medieval Europe a little longer. The streets are quiet now. The gates are closed, and behind thick wooden doors, people prepare for sleep. But in this world, sleep is not simply rest. Sleep is regulated. In medieval Europe, the law cared deeply about when people slept, where they slept, and how they slept. To modern ears, this may sound strange. But to medieval society, sleep was part of public order. If people slept at the wrong time, or in the wrong place, or in the wrong way, the balance of the town could be disturbed. And balance was everything. Most towns followed a strict daily rhythm. The day began with church bells. Work followed the sun. And when darkness arrived, life slowed down. Not naturally, but legally. Curfew laws were common. When the evening bell rang, everyone understood its message. The day is over. The night begins. Stay inside. This was not a suggestion. It was the law. Walking outside after curfew was often forbidden. If someone needed to travel at night, they required permission, a letter from a lord, a reason approved by the church, a task that served authority. Without this, being outside at night made you suspicious, and suspicion alone could bring punishment. So most people stayed home. And so, sleep came early, but sleep itself looked very different from what we know today. Most medieval homes had one main room. This room was used for cooking, working, eating, and sleeping. There were no bedrooms, as we understand them now. At night, beds were pulled close together. Sometimes they were nothing more than wooden frames filled with straw or wool. Privacy was rare, and it was not expected that the law did not value solitude. It valued togetherness and control. Families slept together, parents beside children, siblings side by side. Sometimes even animals shared the same space. In many regions, servants slept near their masters, not because it was comfortable, but because it allowed supervision. That sleep was not private. It was visible, and visibility meant order. There were also laws about where certain people could sleep. Travelers were often required to stay in approved inns. Sleeping in barns, streets, or near city walls could be illegal. Vagrancy laws were strict. A person found sleeping in the wrong place could be questioned, fined, or expelled from town. Sleep, once again, was tied to belonging. If you belonged, you slept where you were told. Silence during the night was also enforced. In many towns, noise after curfew was punishable. Talking too loudly, singing, laughing, even arguments between family members could attract attention. Neighbors listened. Not out of curiosity, but out of duty. Reporting noise was seen as protecting the community. So people learned to whisper, and over time, quiet became natural. The law also controlled when people were allowed to wake before dawn. Movement was discouraged. Being awake too early, especially outside, could seem suspicious. Only certain professions were allowed to rise before sunrise. Bakers, mill workers, monks, everyone else was expected to remain still until the day officially began. Sleep followed the bell. Waking followed the bell. Time itself belonged to authority. Children learned these rules early. They were taught to go to bed when told, to stay quiet, and to rise with the household. There was little tolerance for restlessness. A child awake at night was not seen as curious. They were seen as disobedient. Sleep trained obedience from a young age. Even dreams were shaped by this controlled world. People believed that dreams could carry messages from God, from the devil, from unseen forces. Because of this, sleep was also a moral act. Sleeping too much was considered laziness. Sleeping too little could be seen as unnatural. The correct amount of sleep was rarely written down, but deeply understood. Moderation was the rule. Church teachings supported these ideas. Priests spoke about proper rest, about waking for prayer, about avoiding sinful thoughts at night. Confession sometimes included questions about sleep. Did you stay awake for the wrong reasons? Did you dream sinful dreams? Did you neglect prayer before bed? Even in rest, the soul was monitored. For modern listeners, this may feel overwhelming. But for medieval people, it created a sense of rhythm. Life moved slowly, predictably. There were no screens, no endless distractions. Night meant darkness. Darkness meant rest, and rest was expected. As you listen now, you may notice something interesting. Despite the strict rules, this world feels calm. Heavy, controlled, but calm. The absence of choice removed anxiety. People did not ask when they should sleep. They were told. And so a mind could settle. Imagine lying on a straw-filled mattress. The room is dim. A single candle flickers around you. Others breathe slowly. Outside, the town sleeps together. No engines. No distant sirens. Only wind. And silence. The law has done its work. In the next chapter, we will explore another quiet force that shaped medieval nights. Light. Candles. Fire. And the rules that controlled them. But for now, remain here. In this shared sleep. In this ordered darkness, let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts soften. Just as they did centuries ago. The medieval night was not meant to be bright. Darkness was normal. Darkness was expected. And because of that, light itself became something that needed rules. As you remain in this quiet world, let us look closer at the soft glow of a candle and the laws that surrounded it. In medieval Europe, light was precious. There was no electricity, no lamps at the touch of a switch. Light came from fire, and fire was dangerous. Because of this, the law paid close attention to how light was used. A candle was not just an object. It was a responsibility. Candles were made from tallow or beeswax. Beeswax candles burned cleaner and smelled better. They were also expensive. Because of this, laws often decided who could use which kind of candle. Churches used beeswax. Wealthy homes used beeswax. Ordinary people used tallow. If they used candles at all, even light reflected social order. In many towns, there were limits on how many candles a household could light at night. Some laws allowed only one candle after sunset. Others required candles to be placed in metal holders. Leaving a candle unattended was a serious offense. Not because of carelessness, but because of fear. Fire could destroy everything, and when fire destroyed order, the law answered harshly. Wooden houses stood close together. Roofs were made of straw. Walls were dry and thin. One careless flame could burn an entire street. Because of this, town councils created strict rules. No open flames after curfew. No cooking fires late at night. No candles near windows or light was allowed, but only in silence, and only under control. Night watchmen were trained to look for light, a flicker in a window, a glow behind shutters. Too much light could draw attention, not because light was forbidden, but because it suggested activity, and activity at night was suspicious. So, people learned to keep their candles low. The softer the light, the safer the household. In some towns, laws required households to extinguish all flames when the curfew bell rang. This meant darkness, true darkness. Families prepared for this moment. Candles were blown out carefully. Fires were covered with ash. The room would fall silent, and black. Sleep followed naturally. Light also carried spiritual meaning. The church taught that light represented God. Darkness represented temptation. Because of this, light was used carefully in religious settings. Candles burned during prayer. They were placed near altars, but excessive light was seen as pride. Even churches followed rules. Nothing was allowed to shine too brightly. Inside homes, light shaped evening behavior. People did not read late at night. Books were rare, and reading required light. Instead, evenings were quiet. Conversation slowed. Hands rested. Darkness guided the body toward sleep. The law did not need to force rest. Lights simply disappeared. Children were taught to respect the candle. Do not touch it. Do not play near it. Do not waste it. A burned finger was not the only danger. Breaking candle rules could bring punishment to the family. Responsibility was shared. Even the youngest learned caution. Fireplaces were also regulated. In many towns, fires had to be built in specific places. Chimneys were inspected. Ash had to be stored properly. Some laws required water buckets to be kept nearby at all times. Fire was useful. Fire was necessary, but fire was never trusted. During festivals or holy days, rules sometimes changed. Candles filled churches. Torches lined streets. But even then, order remained. There were rules about who could carry a torch, how tall it could be, where it could be lit. Light was celebrated, but still controlled. For medieval people, darkness was not always frightening. It was familiar. The night sky was full of stars. The moon guided travelers. Inside homes, darkness brought rest. The absence of light quieted the mind. Perhaps this is something we have forgotten. As you listen now, imagine a small room, stone walls, a wooden table. A single candle burns low. Its flame moves gently, responding to your breath. Shadows dance softly. Then, slowly, the candle is blown out. Darkness arrives. Not suddenly, but gently. Outside, the town sleeps. No windows glow. No fires crackle. The law has shaped the night into stillness, and in that stillness, sleep comes easily. In the next chapter, we will explore something people saw every day. Clothing. What could be worn, what was forbidden, and how the law decided who you were before you ever spoke. But for now, stay here. In the dark, in the calm, let the candle fade from your thoughts, and allow yourself to rest, just as they did long ago. In medieval Europe, what you wore was never just fashion. Clothing was law. Before you spoke, before you introduced yourself, before anyone knew your name, your clothes told your story. And that story was carefully controlled. As morning light returned to the town, people dressed not for comfort, but for order. The law decided what fabrics you could touch, what colors you could wear, and even how long your sleeves could be. These rules were known as sumptuary laws. They existed across Europe, from England to Italy, from France to the German lands, and they reached into every household. The purpose of these laws was simple. Everyone should know their place. Clothing made social rank visible. A noble could be recognized at a glance. A merchant could be identified instantly. A farmer never looked like a lord. Order was maintained without words. Certain fabrics were forbidden to ordinary people. Silk was reserved for the wealthy. Velvet was restricted. Fine wool was limited, even if someone could afford it. They were not allowed to wear it. Money did not matter. Law mattered more. Colors were also controlled. Bright reds, deep purples, and rich blues were symbols of power. Purple, in particular, was closely guarded. It was associated with royalty and divine authority. In many regions, wearing purple without permission was a serious offense. Color itself had a hierarchy. For common people, clothing was simple, natural tones, browns, grays, soft greens. Dyes were expensive. and bright colors were suspicious. Looking too rich could attract attention. And attention from the law was rarely welcome. Even the shape of clothing was regulated. Sleeves could not be too long. Cloaks could not drag on the ground. Pointed shoes, popular among nobles, were often banned for commoners. In some cities, shoe length was measured. Too long, and you paid a fine. The body itself was shaped by law. Women faced even stricter rules. Married women were required to cover their hair. Uncovered hair was seen as improper, even dangerous. Scarves, veils, and head coverings were signs of respectability. Young, unmarried women had different rules. Widows had their own clothing codes. Every stage of life came with instructions. Jewelry was also controlled. Gold and silver were not for everyone. Certain stones were restricted. Certain rings were forbidden. Even belts and buttons could be regulated. A woman wearing jewelry above her station could be punished, not for beauty, but for disobedience. These laws were enforced publicly. Officials watched markets and streets. They observed what people wore. If someone violated the rules, they could be fined. In some cases, the clothing itself was taken away. Shame was part of the punishment. To be seen as breaking order was deeply uncomfortable. Children learned these rules early. They wore what their parents wore. They dressed as their future demanded. There was no space for experimentation. Clothing was training. By wearing their place, they learned to accept it. For travelers, clothing could be dangerous. Arriving in a town dressed too finely raised suspicion. Dressed too poorly, and doors stayed closed. Many travelers carried extra layers to adjust their appearance. Blending in was a survival skill. From a modern perspective, these rules may feel limiting. But for medieval society, they provided clarity. No confusion. No blurred lines. You knew who you were because the law dressed you. There was also comfort in sameness. Villages looked uniform. Colors repeated. The visual calm matched the slow rhythm of life. Nothing changed quickly, and that steadiness helped people feel secure. Imagine a medieval street at midday. People pass quietly, their clothing simple, their colors muted. No bright signs, no flashing displays. Just fabric, moving gently with the wind. The law has softened the world. As you listen now, you may notice how calming this feels. A world without fashion trends, without pressure to stand out. Everyone dressed as expected. The mind could rest. In the next chapter, we will step into kitchens and halls. We will explore laws about food and drink, what people were allowed to eat, when they could eat, and how even hunger was shaped by authority. But for now, remain here. In this quiet street, among soft colors, under simple rules. Let your thoughts become as gentle as the cloth they wore. And allow yourself to drift further into rest. In medieval Europe, food was never just food. Eating was guided, restricted, and carefully watched. What you placed on your table was shaped by law, by religion, and by tradition. As we move gently forward in time, let us step into medieval kitchens where meals were simple and rules were everywhere. Most people ate to survive, not for pleasure, not for choice. The law believed that too much enjoyment could lead to disorder. So, Even hunger was regulated. Meals followed a strict rhythm. Breakfast, as we know it today, was uncommon. Many people ate only 1 or 2 meals a day. The timing of these meals was influenced by work, by daylight, and by church bells. Eating late at night was often discouraged. Food, like sleep, had its proper place. Religion played a powerful role in shaping food laws. The church declared certain days as holy. On these days, meat was forbidden. No beef, no pork, no poultry. Instead, people ate fish, bread, or simple vegetables. Breaking these rules was considered a sin, and sin had consequences. There were many fasting days, more than modern listeners might imagine. Wednesdays, Fridays, entire seasons of the year, Lent in particular, required strict obedience. For weeks, meals were small and plain. The law supported these rules. Markets adjusted. Butchers closed their stalls. Hunger became a shared experience. Food laws were not only religious, they were also social. Large feasts were sometimes restricted. In certain towns, laws limited the number of dishes allowed at a wedding or celebration. Too much food was seen as wasteful, and waste threatened balance. The law preferred moderation. Even the kinds of food you were allowed to eat could depend on your social class. Certain meats were reserved for the wealthy. Venison, for example, was often protected by law. Hunting in noble forests was forbidden to common people. A farmer caught hunting deer could face severe punishment, not because of the animal, but because of ownership. Food belonged to power. Bread was the center of every meal. Rich or poor, everyone ate bread. Because of this, bread was closely regulated. There were laws about weight and quality. Bakers were inspected regularly. A loaf that was too small could lead to fines. In some towns, dishonest bakers were punished publicly. Bread was sacred. It could not be abused. Drink was also regulated. Water was often unsafe. So, people drank ale or beer instead. Even children drank weak ale. The brewing was controlled. Only approved brewers were allowed to sell. Prices were fixed by law. Selling bad ale was a serious offense. Drink was meant to nourish, not to intoxicate. Wine followed similar rules. In wine-growing regions, its production was protected. There were laws about how wine was stored, how it was sold, and when it could be consumed. Drinking too much was frowned upon. Public drunkenness could bring punishment. Moderation was always expected. Meals were quiet affairs. There was little conversation. Food was eaten slowly, not because people were relaxed, but because silence was a form of discipline. Children were taught to sit, still to chew quietly. To show gratitude for whatever was provided. Eating was instruction. Utensils were simple. Most people used their hands. Spoons were common. Forks were rare. Knives were personal items. Sharing food was common. Sharing plates, sharing bowls, meals, reinforced community, and community reinforced order. Markets were watched closely. Inspectors checked meat and fish. Rotten food was confiscated. Selling spoiled goods was a crime. Public health even in its early form, was enforced. Food safety was a legal matter. During times of famine, laws became stricter. Hoarding food was forbidden. Prices were capped in some towns. Grain stores were guarded. The law tried to prevent panic. Order was more important than comfort. For the medieval mind, food was moral. Eating too much was a weakness. Eating too little was suspicious. The correct amount was understood without numbers. Balance was the goal. As you listen now, imagine a simple meal, a wooden table, a loaf of bread, a bowl of stewed. Steam rises slowly. There is no rush. No noise, just quiet nourishment. Outside, fields rest under the sky. Inside, people eat in silence. The law is satisfied. The body is fed. And the day moves gently forward. In the next chapter, we will explore another deeply personal subject. Marriage. Who could marry? When they could marry? And how love was often secondary to law. But for now, remain here. In this quiet kitchen. With this simple meal, let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts soften. And allow yourself to rest. Just as they did centuries ago. In medieval Europe, marriage was not a private choice. It was a public arrangement, a legal agreement, and a moral obligation. Love could exist, but it was never the center. Law was. Marriage shaped families. Families shaped society. Because of this, the law paid close attention to who married whom, when they married, and under what conditions. As we move quietly through this world, let us step into the halls, chapels, and homes where marriages were decided. Most marriages began with permission. Permission from parents. Permission from lords. Permission from the church. A marriage without approval could be declared invalid. Even if the couple wished it, the law could say no. Choice was limited. Age mattered. Girls were often married young, sometimes in their early teens. Boys married later, once they could provide. These ages were accepted, not questioned. The law reflected survival, not romance. Life was uncertain. Marriage was stability. The church held great power over marriage. Marriage ceremony was not only a celebration. It was a legal act. Witnesses were required. Words had to be spoken correctly. A mistake in vows could raise doubts. The law listened carefully. Marriage between relatives was restricted. The church defined how closely related a couple could be. Sometimes the rules were strict, distant. Cousins could be forbidden. These laws were complex and not always understood, but they were enforced. Dowries were central to marriage. A bride brought property, money, or goods. This was not a gift. It was a legal contribution. Dowries protected women in case of widowhood, but they also bound families together. Marriage was an exchange. Once married, roles were clearly defined. The husband was the head. The wife was expected to obey. This was written into law. Women could not easily own property. They could not represent themselves in court. Marriage transferred authority. Divorce, as we know it today, did not exist. Marriage was considered permanent. Separation was possible, but rare. Annulments could be granted, but only under specific conditions. Even then, the process was long and public. The law did not like endings. Infidelity was treated seriously. For women, punishments were harsh. For men, rules were often more forgiving. This imbalance was accepted. Law reflected social beliefs. Equality was not expected. Widow changes. Widow gained some independence. She could manage property. She could make decisions, but she was also expected to remarry. A woman alone was seen as vulnerable. Marriage was protection. Children born within marriage had legal status. Children born outside often did not. Inheritance depended on legitimacy. Marriage controlled bloodlines, and bloodlines controlled power. Marriages were not private. Events. They were announced publicly, sometimes days in advance. The community watched. Objections could be raised. If someone knew of a legal issue, they were expected to speak. Silence was consent. The wedding day itself was simple for most people. A church, a priest, a short ceremony. Celebrations varied by class, but the legal words were the same. Once spoken, the law recognized the union. For medieval people, marriage was predictable. There were rules. There was structure. This reduced uncertainty. Even if love was absent, order remained. As you listen now, imagine a quiet chapel, stone walls, soft candlelight. Two people stand side by side. Their hands touch briefly. The words are spoken. The law approves. Outside, life continues. Fields need tending. Homes need care. Marriage becomes routine, part of the rhythm of life. In the next chapter, we will focus on women more closely, their daily lives, their limitations, and the laws that quietly shaped every step they took. But for now, remain here. In this calm chapel. With steady voices, let the ceremony fade. Let the quiet return. And allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. In medieval Europe, many laws spoke softly. They did not shout. They did not announce themselves loudly, but they were always present. For women, law was something felt every day, even when it was never spoken aloud. A woman's life was shaped long before she understood it. From birth, rules waited patiently. Rules about where she could go, what she could say, who she must obey. These laws were not hidden. They were accepted, and because they were accepted, they felt invisible. Most women lived under authority. First, their father, then their husband. If neither was present, a male guardian. The law rarely imagined a woman standing alone. Independence was not forbidden, but it was discouraged. Order preferred supervision. Women could not easily own property. In many regions, land passed through male hands. A woman might manage property, but she rarely controlled it. Legal documents listed husbands and fathers. Women appeared quietly, if at all. Ownership followed authority. In courts, women faced limitations. They could not always testify. They could not always represent themselves. Their words carried less weight. This was not considered unfair. It was considered natural. The law reflected belief, not equality. Daily movement was also regulated. Women were expected to stay close to home. Markets, wells, and churches were acceptable spaces. Beyond that, questions arose. Why was she there? Who allowed it? A woman walking alone could attract suspicion. Clothing laws, as we saw earlier, were especially strict for women. Hair coverings were common. Loose hair suggested youth, or worse, impropriety. Married women covered their heads. Widows dressed in muted colors. Clothing announced status before a word was spoken. Speech was also watched. Women were expected to speak softly to avoid argument. To avoid public debate, a woman who spoke too much could be labeled troublesome. Silence was praised. Quiet obedience was seen as virtue. Work filled most days. Women cooked, cleaned, spun wool, raised children. These tasks were not considered small. They were essential, but they were rarely rewarded. Work inside the home was invisible to the law. It was expected, not recognized. Marriage changed a woman's legal identity. Once married, a woman's actions were tied to her husband, contracts, debts, agreements. The law assumed he spoke for both. Her voice merged into his. Yet, within these limits, women found small spaces of influence. In the home, they managed resources. They decided meals. They guided children. These choices shaped daily life. Power existed quietly. Widows experienced a different world. Without a husband, some women gained legal freedom. They could manage property. They could make decisions. But this freedom was temporary. Society expected remarriage. A woman alone made the law uneasy. The church also shaped women's lives. Religious teachings praised obedience, humility, and patience. Female saints were admired for suffering silently. Strength was defined as endurance. These ideals entered the law. Education for women was rare. Could not read or write. Knowledge passed through listening, not books. This limited access kept authority intact. Those who control knowledge control. Order. Punishment affected women differently. Public shame was common. Scolding, fines, public warnings. Physical punishment existed, but reputation damage was often enough. A woman's honor was fragile, and the law knew it. Despite all this, life continued calmly. Women laughed with children, shared stories with neighbors, found comfort in routine. The law restricted, but it also stabilized. Predictability replaced uncertainty. From a modern view, these rules feel heavy. But for medieval society, they were normal. They shaped expectations. They reduced chaos, and they created a quiet rhythm of life. Imagine a medieval home at dusk. A woman moves slowly through the room. She prepares the evening meal. She checks the fire. She calls the children inside. Outside, the street grows quiet. Inside, order continues. There is no rebellion here. Only routine. Only repetition. Only life. Lived within lines drawn long ago. As you listen now, notice how gentle this world feels. Limited. Yes, but calm. Everything has a place. Everyone knows their role. The mind is not raced. In the next chapter, we will look at children, their work, their responsibilities, and how childhood itself was understood very differently. But for now, remain here. In this quiet home, with steady hands, with familiar tasks. Let the rules fade into the background. Let the rhythm slow. And allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. just as the world outside grows still. In medieval Europe, childhood was short. There was no clear line between being a child and being an adult. The law did not protect childhood. It prepared children for responsibility. From a young age, children were expected to help. They worked beside their parents. They learned by watching. They copied what they saw. There were no special laws to shield them from labor. Work was not punishment. It was training. Boys and girls had different expectations. Boys followed their fathers. Girls stayed close to their mothers. The law did not ask what a child wanted. It asked what the family needed. Many children began working as soon as they could walk steadily. They carried water. They gathered firewood. They watched animals. These tasks were normal. No one called it unfair. Life required hands. By the age of 7, many children were already learning a trade. Some became apprentices. They lived with masters. They learned skills. Apprenticeship was regulated by law. Contracts were signed. Years were set. Childhood slowly faded into obligation. Girls often learned domestic skills, cooking, spinning wool, cleaning. These skills prepared them for marriage. Education was practical, not academic. The law valued usefulness. Schooling was rare. Only a small number of boys attended church schools. They learned to read Latin. They memorized prayers. Girls were rarely included. Knowledge followed power. Children were also subject to punishment. If a child broke the law, they could be punished much like an adult. Age did not always protect them. Responsibility came early. Obedience was expected. Parents were legally responsible for their children's behavior. A child's mistake reflected on the family. This encouraged strict discipline. Correction was considered love. Games existed, but they were simple. Stones, sticks, homemade. Toys. Play was brief. There was always work waiting. Law did not protect leisure. Illness and death were common among children. The law did not address grief. Families accepted loss quietly. Life moved forward. Children who survived were expected to grow strong. Orphans were treated differently. Some were taken in by relatives. Others entered service early. The law offered little comfort. Survival depended on community. Despite this, children still found joy. They laughed while working. They whispered stories at night. They learned songs. Routine created familiarity. Familiarity created calm. Imagine a medieval morning. A child wakes early. The room is cold. They dress quickly. They step outside. The world feels large, but familiar. Work begins. There is no rush. The day unfolds slowly. The child moves with purpose, not anxiety. They know what is expected. Expectation brings clarity. As you listen now, notice how quiet this feels. No choices. No pressure to decide a future. Life flows in one direction. The mind rests. In the next chapter, we will look at a subject that surprises many listeners. Animals. Creatures that lived alongside humans and were sometimes judged by law. But for now, remain here. In this simple morning. With steady routines, with gentle repetition, let the world feel small and safe. Let your thoughts slow. and allow yourself to drift deeper into sleep. As the child does, moving calmly into another ordinary day. In medieval Europe, animals were everywhere. They walked the streets. They lived inside homes. They worked beside humans. And sometimes they stood before the law. To the medieval mind, animals were not separate from society. They were part of daily life, part of work, part of survival. Because of this, they were also part of order. And order required rules. Animals pulled carts, turned mills, guarded homes. They shared space with people. A pig might wander freely. A dog might sleep near the door. Chickens filled courtyards. This closeness created familiarity, but it also created problems. When animals caused harm, the law responded. Not quietly, not privately. But publicly. In some towns, animals were put on trial. Yes, actual trials. With witnesses, with judges, with formal decisions. If a pig injured a child, it could be arrested. If rats damaged crops, they could be summoned. If livestock disrupted order, the law intervened. These events were serious. They followed procedure. To modern listeners, this sounds strange, but to medieval society, it made sense. Law was moral. If humans were judged for wrongdoing, why not animals? The world was unified. Responsibility extended everywhere. Records exist of pigs being dressed in clothes and brought before courts. They were assigned defenders. They were accused. Formally. Judgments were announced. Punishments followed. The law spoke calmly, even to animals. Sometimes, the goal was not punishment. It was balance. Public trials reassured communities. They showed that order was restored. Fear was reduced. Routine returned. Animals could also be protected by law. Working animals were valuable. Harming another person's horse was a serious crime. Stealing livestock could lead to harsh penalties. Animals were property, but they were also essential. There were rules about where animals could go. Pigs roaming freely were sometimes banned. Animals could not block streets. They could not enter certain spaces. Fines were issued to owners. Responsibility always returned to humans. In rural areas, laws about animals shaped farming life. Fields were divided carefully. Animals could not graze freely everywhere. Boundaries mattered. One animal crossing a line could cause disputes. The law stepped in. Animals were also tied to religion. Church teachings spoke of animals as part of God's creation. They had roles. They had limits. Some animals were seen as clean. Others were not. Food laws reflected this. Animals entered belief, not just labor. During plagues, animals were sometimes blamed. Cats were feared. Dogs were restricted. The law reacted cautiously. Fear shaped decisions. Order was fragile. Despite all this, animals remained close companions. Children played with them. Families depended on them. They were familiar shapes in every scene. Their presence was comforting. Imagine a medieval street at dawn. A pig moves slowly across stone. A dog sleeps near a doorway. Birds settle on rooftops. No one rushes. This is normal. The law watches quietly, not aggressively. It waits, only stepping in when balance shifts. For medieval people, These rules made the world predictable. Even animals had boundaries. Nothing moved without meaning. Everything had a place. As you listen now, notice how gentle this feels. Even judgment is slow. Even punishment is formal. Nothing is sudden. The pace invites calm. In the next chapter, we will explore small human actions. Laughing too loudly. Speaking at the wrong time. Simple behaviors that could become offenses. But for now, remain here. In this quiet street. Among animals and stone. Let the sounds fade. Let the world settle. And allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. As the town breathes slowly, under rules that touch every living thing. In medieval Europe, crime was not always dramatic. Most offenses were small, quiet, ordinary. They happened during normal days, in familiar places. And yet, the law noticed them all. People did not need to steal or cause harm to break the law. Sometimes, they only needed to speak or move at the wrong moment. The rules reached deeply into daily behavior. Noise was a common concern. Speaking too loudly could be an offense. Laughing late at night. Singing outside permitted hours. Even calling out in the street after curfew could bring trouble. Silence was a sign of order. Public behavior was closely watched. Standing in groups without purpose could raise suspicion. Walking a street. Lingering too long. The law preferred movement to be meaningful. Idle behavior felt dangerous. Markets had their own rules. Arguing with sellers. Using harsh language. Pushing through crowds. These acts were discouraged. Orderly trade kept peace. The law protected calm exchange. Religious respect was expected. Failing to greet a priest could be noted. Skipping church without reason could raise questions. Religion and law moved together. Public behavior reflected belief. Dress and posture mattered. A disrespectful stance. A mocking gesture. Even facial expressions could be judged. Behavior was visible law. Drinking in public was allowed in moderation. Too much drink changed everything. Public drunkenness was frowned upon. The law saw intoxication as loss of control. Control was essential. Games and play were regulated. Dice games, street games, some were allowed. Others were banned. Play was watched carefully. Too much excitement was unsettling. Swearing and harsh words were also monitored. Blasphemy was serious. Words held power. Careless speech could offend not only people, but God. The law listened closely. Even greetings followed rules. Failing to acknowledge elders. Ignoring authority. These were not crimes in the modern sense, but they disturbed. Harmony. And harmony was worth protecting. Punishments for small offenses were usually light. Fines, public warnings, sometimes brief detention. The goal was correction, not cruelty. The law preferred compliance. Public shame was often enough. Being corrected in front of others encouraged caution. Reputation mattered deeply. A quiet life was a safe life. Children learned these rules by watching adults. They copied behavior. They learned when to speak, when to stay silent. The law taught through example. Imagine a medieval marketplace. Stalls line the street. People move slowly. Voices are low. No one rushes. The law breathes here. A man speaks too loudly. A watchful eye turns. He lowers his voice. Order is restored. Nothing dramatic happens. And that is the point dot as you listen now. Notice how calming this world feels. Every action has boundaries. Every movement is guided. There is no chaos dot only gentle correction. These small rules created predictable days. People knew what to expect. Expectation reduces anxiety. The law understood this dot in the next chapter. We will look at punishment dot public, visible, and designed to teach. But we will approach it gently, without harsh detail dot for now. Remain here, in this calm market. With steady voices, let the rules fade into the background. Let your thoughts slow dot and allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. As the town continues its day, quietly, under laws that guide even the smallest actions dot in medieval Europe, punishment was rarely hidden. It was meant to be seen, not to shock, but to remind. The law believed that order was learned by watching. Public punishment was part of daily life, that it took place in open spaces, market squares, town crossroads, places where people already gathered. The goal was simple, to show consequences, to restore balance. Not every punishment was harsh, many were quiet, and most were brief. For small offenses, punishment was light, a fine, a warning, sometimes a short moment of public attention, enough to correct behavior, enough to move on. One common method was standing in public, that the person remained visible, no chains. No pain, just presence. People passed by, they saw. They understood, another method was public announcement. A town crier read the offense aloud, the words were formal. The tone was calm. The message was clear. Shame was powerful. Reputation mattered deeply. A single mistake could change how others looked at you. Because of this, most people avoided trouble. Stocks and pillories were also used. They restrained movement. They lasted for a short time. The purpose was not harm, it was pause. A moment to reflect. These punishments were supervised. Officials watched. Carefully, limits were enforced. The law controlled itself. Excess was discouraged. Violence was not the goal. Fear was not the goal, memory was the goal. People remembered what they saw, and memory shaped behavior. Children often witnessed these events, not to frighten them, but to teach them. The lesson was simple. Actions have outcomes. Religious elements were sometimes included. Prayers were spoken. Forgiveness was encouraged. Punishment ended with return. The community accepted people back. Once punishment was complete, the matter was closed. There was no lasting mark, no endless punishment. Life continued. The law allowed renewal. Imagine a quiet town square. The sun is low. A few people gather. A brief announcement is made, then it ends. The square returns to calm, no shouting. No chaos, just routine. Order flows back naturally. Public punishment also reminded officials of their role. They were seen as guardians, not tyrants. They followed rules. They showed restraint. The law was not fast, that it moved deliberately, that it gave time for thought. Speed was not important. Stability was as you listen now. Notice how gentle this feels. Even discipline is slow. Even correction is measured. There is no rush. This approach kept. Community's predictable. Predictability brings comfort. Comfort brings rest. The law understood this in the next chapter. We will explore something quieter still. How death was treated by law. not violently, but carefully, with ritual and respect. For now, stay here. In this quiet square. Let the sounds soften. Let the figures fade. Allow your breathing to slow. And drift deeper into rest. As the town settles again, guided by laws designed to teach, not to disturb. In medieval Europe, death was familiar. It was not hidden. It was not rushed. It was part of life. And because it touched everyone, the law guided it carefully. When someone died, rules came into place. Quiet rules. Respectful rules. They helped the living move forward. They helped the dead find rest. The moment of death was acknowledged. Formally, a bell might ring. A message might be spoken. The community was informed that no one was alone in this moment. The body was treated with care. Washing was common. Clothing was chosen thoughtfully. Nothing was hurried. Each step mattered. The law ensured dignity. Burial usually happened quickly, often within a day. This was practical, but it was also symbolic. The world moved forward, but gently. Churchyards were regulated spaces. Not every place was allowed for burial. Location mattered. Burial near sacred ground was meaningful. The law protected these areas. Graves had boundaries. Depth was specified. Spacing was considered. The land was shared. Order continued, even in rest. Funerals followed. Tradition. Processions moved slowly. Voices were low. Prayers were spoken softly. There was no display. Only presence. The law limited excess. Too much noise was discouraged. Too much display was seen as disruption. Grief was personal, but calm was public. Certain deaths were treated differently. Strangers, the poor, those without family. The law still provided structure. No one was forgotten. Unclaimed bodies were handled respectfully. Burial was simple, but it was still burial. The law ensured no one was left without rest. Executions, when they occurred, followed separate rules, but burial followed. Even punishment ended with dignity. The body was not abandoned. Property and inheritance were also addressed. The law moved carefully here. Clear rules prevented conflict. Death did not mean chaos. Families were given time to mourn, time to adjust. Certain activities paused. Life slowed briefly. Then continued. Imagine a small village at dusk. A bell rings once. People pause. Heads lower. Then the sound fades. Life resumes. Quietly. This rhythm brought comfort. Familiar steps. Known customs. The law created predictability in the most uncertain moment. For medieval people, these rules were not cold. They were reassuring. They guided emotions. They provided structure when feelings were heavy. As you listen now, notice how calm this feels. Even endings are gentle. Even loss is guided. There is no fear here. Only order. In the final chapter, we will step back. We will look at the bigger picture. How all these laws shape daily peace, and why they still matter today. For now, remain here. In the fading light, with the soft bell echoing in the distance. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts soften. And drift deeper into rest. As the village settles under laws designed to care for both the living and the dead. When we look back at medieval Europe, it is easy to see confusion. Strange rules, unfamiliar customs. But to those who lived there, these laws created peace, not excitement, not freedom as we know it, but calm. Life was uncertain. Weather changed suddenly. Illness arrived without warning. Travel was slow and dangerous. Because of this, people valued predictability. And the law offered exactly the laws of medieval Europe were not designed to surprise. They were designed to repeat. Day after day, year after year, repetition built comfort. Comfort reduced fear. Every chapter of life was guided. Work, rest, speech, movement, even silence had rules. And because of this, people knew where they stood. These laws created rhythm. Morning bells, market hours, curfews at night. Time moved in familiar patterns. Nothing rushed. Nothing demanded urgency. Rules about clothing, speech, and behavior helped people blend in. Standing out was risky. Blending in felt safe. The law encouraged harmony. Disputes were settled publicly. Punishments were visible, not hidden, not mysterious. This transparency mattered. People trusted what they could see. Even animals followed rules. Even death followed structure. Nothing existed outside order. This gave meaning to a difficult world. To modern listeners, these laws may seem strict, but strictness can feel comforting when life feels fragile. Boundaries create safety. Medieval people did not seek freedom in the modern sense. They sought stability, a predictable tomorrow. A familiar routine. The law helped provide this. Imagine waking each morning. What is allowed. Knowing what is expected. Knowing what will happen. If you step outside the lines, there is calm and certainty. The law was woven into daily life. Not as a threat, but as a guide, a quiet presence. Always there. Villages move slowly. Towns breathed gently. Even conflict followed rules. Nothing exploded. Suddenly. Everything unfolded at a measured pace. Because of this, communities stayed together. Shared rules created shared identity. Everyone lived under the same expectations. As centuries passed, many of these laws disappeared. The world changed. Speed increased. Freedom expanded. But something was lost as well. The quiet certainty. The slow rhythm. The sense that everything had its place. As you listen now, notice how your body responds. Slower breathing. Softer thoughts. The mind relaxes when structure feels gentle. This is why these stories work so well for sleep. They describe a world without urgency. Without endless choice. A world guided softly. Imagine a medieval town at night. Doors closed. Candles low. The streets are empty. Everyone knows where they should be. The law rests, too. Watching quietly. Not acting. Just existing. No alarms. No sudden demands. Only routine. Only rest. These laws were not perfect, but they created calm in a harsh world. They allowed people to sleep. And now, they allow you to sleep as well. You do not need to remember. Details. You do not need to analyze. Just let the rhythm. Continue. The bells have rung. The market is closed. The town is still. Here. In this quiet moment, let your thoughts drift like mist over stone streets. Nothing is required of you. Nothing needs to be decided. The law has done its work. Order is restored. And as the medieval world fades gently away, allow yourself to drift deeper into rest. Breathing slow, body heavy, mind quiet. The story ends, but the calm remains.